The Great CO2 Injection Experiment begins. Within the last few days, my supplies for a paintball CO2 system arrived, and today, the last piece, this diffuser, it's a Neo mini diffuser, which is supposed to put out very, very fine bubbles of CO2. The finer the bubbles, the better. Arrived. It wasn't supposed to arrive till Tuesday, but the delivery was faster than expected, so it came today. So as soon as it came, I went down to this place called, I can't remember now, but some paintball supplies store in 2nd Street in San Jose, and got the paintball canister filled, and just with much trepidation put it all together. Wasn't quite sure exactly if I was doing things right, but I did a lot of research in the last few days on how to connect the different pieces together. And so there's the little Neo diffuser. Right now I have it set to 1 bubble for every 3 seconds. 1 bubble per 3 seconds. Which is really small, but this is a tiny tank. It's only 5-gallon aquarium, so you need less. And that means my paintball canister of CO2 will last longer. They say it lasts for several months, and it costs only $6 to fill it. So anyway, we'll see. My plants have been doing well, low tech, but I've always been curious to see what difference CO2 would make. And so we'll see the rate and how green and everything that the plants become with this CO2. Another thing that you put in the tank is right there. It's a drop checker. You put a little solution in there. It's to check pH, I think, or something. But I wait a couple of hours before it finally detects how much CO2 is in your aquarium to see if you've got the regulator of the bubbles set correctly. And if it turns green in a couple of hours, you know you've got the right amount of CO2 going. If it turns yellow, that means you've got too much CO2, and that could be bad if you intended to put fish in here, because that would kill them. And if it turns blue, you know, if it remains blue after 2 hours, then that means you don't have enough CO2, and so you just adjust the bubbles that come out of the diffuser. And that's a ceramic diffuser. And that is simply hooked up to a tubing. You use special CO2 rated tubing, which is a bit stronger than regular aquarium tubing, I guess, to deal with the pressure of the CO2. So I have it going in and coming down behind to the side of my little shelving that holds the aquarium. So I'll stop this here and tell you all about this tank. All right, here's where I have the CO2 canister. It's just a 20-ounce paintball CO2 tank. So I ordered one online. Of course, they send it unfilled because that would be unsafe to send it filled with CO2. So you just take it to any place, some sporting goods store, or in my case, I went to this paintball supplies store. 20 ounces, and what you attach to it is a regulator, which is the thing, the black thing with the different gauges and the little drop checker, not drop checker, bubble counter attached to it with a adjustment dial at the bottom of the bubble counter. And then this one came with a solenoid, which you want to get because you want to connect it to a timer. And I have just one of those regular digital timers up there connected to this solenoid. And what that does is you set it, most places say to turn on the CO2 an hour before your lights come on for the day, and then turn off the CO2 an hour before you turn off your lights for the day. So right now I'm having the lights on about 10 hours from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that may be too much, but that's what I've been doing. So that means I turn on the CO2 with the timer at 6 a.m. and I turn it off at 4 p.m. And they say that's a good way to do it, because you want the CO2 to kind of be in the tank, in your aquarium, ready for when the lights come on, and the plants can then use it. And then you turn it off, the CO2 off, an hour before the lights are turned off. Because the CO2 will remain in the system, in the aquarium, and be there, and the lights will then turn off an hour later. So I'm going to try that. That brass colored thing you see, that's the bubble counter. So as you see, I have it set pretty slowly. So it's about 3 bubbles per second. No, opposite. It takes about 3 seconds for a bubble, between bubbles. And what I read, for a 5-gallon tank, they say that's a good place to start. But the drop checker in 2 hours will tell me whether this is the right amount, and then I can adjust accordingly. You got 2 gauges there. The one on the left tells you how much CO2 is left in the tank, so you know when you're going to start running empty. But again, for a 5-gallon tank, they say this should last months. And on the right is the PSI for, I guess, for the needle valve, or the way the CO2 is coming out of the tank, the pressure, which usually they say is good around 35-40 PSI. Okay. I was kind of paranoid about this. There was just enough space between my bookshelf here and my aquarium shelving for the tank, because the tank isn't very large. It's maybe about a foot high, and then with the regulator on top adds a few inches. But I was kind of paranoid about it possibly ever tipping, because this is just carpet, right? And so what I did was I just took scrap wood and made a little, I don't know if you could see in the back there, but 2 little pieces of wood screwed to hold the sides steady. And yet there's still room enough for me to easily lift this tank out of here if I need to. But I'm not afraid of it tipping now. I was really kind of paranoid about exactly how to set all this up, you know, since it is CO2, it's a gas, and it could be dangerous if you handle it incorrectly. But I did it okay. I put Teflon tape on all the fittings and screwed them on nice and snugly. Okay, so we shall see if my setting for the CO2 is the right setting. Let's see the very, very fine bubbles coming out of there, and we'll see what it does for the plant growth. This is exciting. I always like learning new things, and this is just another new thing that I'm learning. Just a quick clip showing how the dwarf hairgrass will ultimately spread. This is against the front glass of the aquarium, and so that clump of dwarf hairgrass has sent down some roots, and they're growing pretty fast. But you see then, as the white root is growing, it's sending up little green shoots, which will push through the soil and poke through the soil, as many have already. Little ones, as you can see. Pretty cool.